Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Slip Safety Show. My name is Christian Harris and I'm the founder of Slip Safety Services as well as the host of this show. My guest today is a good friend of mine over the years in the insurance claims management world. He's called James Harvey and he's a partner at the law firm BLM. As James will tell us, BLM really specialises in the world of insurance and managing claim incidents and risk for their clients. He's done a lot of work with some of the biggest brand names, businesses in the UK, although clearly we don't talk about those by name, but we talk about some of the things that James has learnt along the way, some of the areas that risk is changing and the claims landscape is changing as a result of the coronavirus. And then we also drill down a little bit into slip claims and ask some questions that I get asked all the time around things like yellow signs and cleaning check sheets, and is slip testing data a benefit or a downfall sometimes when it comes to managing claims. So very interesting from the niche perspective of slip claims, but also a much broader perspective of what's been going on in the field of insurance claims over the years and what James expects going forward. Hope you enjoy this episode. So with that, let's get into the conversation with James Harvey of BLM. James Harvey, welcome to the Slip Safety Show.
Thanks, Christian.
Good to see you over Zoom. Bit different to normally.
It is. It'd be good to get back to seeing you in person.
Yes, and not many people say that, so I appreciate it.
I don't mean it really.
Oh well, there you go. There we go. Well, we've started off on a good footing anyway.
Yeah, I thought I'd better be polite.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I've obviously done a bit of an intro into you, but do you want to just give the people watching or listening a quick overview of your background and what BLM does as well?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm a partner at BLM. I've been at BLM for 21 years now, actually. So since the day I qualified. So
very good.
So I now head up the BLM broker sector group, and also take a lead role in the corporate sector group. Mm-hmm. And I've also just been appointed to BLM exec board. So
congratulations.
No, thank you. So it's been an interesting time, which has obviously created its challenges over the last few weeks, but it's all been good and all been positive, and there's been really good teamwork and good engagement by everyone. So it's been the response has been excellent by everyone in the business. So it's been fantastic. So in terms of the work I personally do, I generally manage relationships between BLM and large corporate clients, managing their risk and their legal defensibility. So, the cost of risk to them. So any claims that turn into litigation, but we also manage some cases from a pre-litigation stage. So first notification of the claim right through to the conclusion, whether that's a settlement or a trial.
Yeah.
So in terms of BLM, I mean, for those who don't know BLM, we act on behalf of mainly insurers, corporates, public sector clients. So local authorities, governing bodies, etc. So and we handle anything that would be described as an insurance claim, but not just a claim. It might be a regulatory incident, but we also now have a team handling some commercial legal advisory work for those clients as well. So, okay. But I'd say 90% of our work is in that insurance and risk space, and within the corporate sector where I'm particularly focused, we're looking at clients across a whole range of businesses, mm-hmm. whether it's retail, leisure, food and drink, property owners, manufacturers, facility services, construction, travel,
very broad,
logistics, public transport, everything. So it's very broad. So I mean, a lot of the issues are, you need to get to know the industry, but a lot of the legal issues tend to be very similar.
Yeah, and I suppose would you say that across those sectors, the types of claims, looking at it from a casualty perspective anyway, so where somebody's got hurt, are quite similar. These similar types of claims you're seeing.
Yeah, I think we are. Yeah, the claims are broadly similar. I mean, if it's a public liability claim, which you see, a good chunk of against those in the leisure and retail sector, you see lots of slips and trip claims. When you move into employers' liability claims, then you'll still see a significant amount of slips and trips, but you'll also then see cases, around manual handling, burns. It will all really depend upon the type of injuries you're working with. So it might be misuse of equipment, it might be impact with moving objects, falls from height. So employment tends to be the EL cases tend to have a lot broader mix in terms of the type.
Yeah.
But slips and trips, I suppose, still tend to be the bigger frequency, probably with manual handling for EL.
And has that changed over time at all, or has that kind of always been the case broadly?
I think that's always been fairly consistent, really. I don't think there's really anything that's changed over the years. I mean, you've still got the footfalls going into shops, and despite a lot of business being done online, even more so at the moment, of course. But you still got the footfall going into retail and leisure premises that then create those same risks. And I think the higher the footfall, the bigger the risk in terms of the slips and trips. So, and again, with those accidents in a workplace, I mean, the types of accidents you're seeing tend to be broadly similar. Yes, there's different operating processes that are being brought in. There's different technology that's being used to try and reduce the amount of lifting someone may do, and but you still do get manual handling cases because there's still people that have to lift as part of their job. And at the same time, you've got people, if you've got chefs in kitchens and whatever, they're still going to get burns.
And cuts
despite
and things,
and cuts, and despite the PPE that's provided. So yeah, I'd suggest that the claims remain fairly static and consistent in terms of the types that you see.
Yeah.
And I think I've not looked, but I suspect that probably is borne out if you went over through the HSE website over the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, the accident statistics, are very, if you look at slips, trips and falls, it's fairly flat in terms of a proportion. But obviously we are seeing, albeit it's slowed down, we have seen, over the decades, a reduction in accident numbers. So, that is a positive, but yeah, proportionally, it seems to stay fairly static. Did anything like the Jackson reforms have any effect on the volumes or not?
In terms of when we moved to the portal and I suppose with the costs being very much reduced for claimants listers, then that probably led to a reduction in some volumes.
Well, that was a few years ago now, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. So obviously, this type of work is a little bit less profitable for claimants. So, and I suppose what it will do is it focus the mind on bringing those claims that are probably more justified, and rather than the spurious claims that maybe just a chance of succeeding. So I think it focuses the mind on bringing those cases that have a higher prospects of success, I think. And I think it is fair to say, I think some of because businesses have a much more risk managed approach these days, because obviously it has the impact on the insurance premiums and also reputation, then I think it is fair to say that the numbers and volumes have reduced. But we're still seeing a significant amount come through though.
What out of interest, you mentioned kind of spurious claims. I mean, what percentage of claims, from one of your typical big clients would you see as being legitimate versus spurious in an average kind of year?
Well,
any idea?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a difficult question to answer. But I think if you look at a retailer as an example, I'm just thinking about one of our retail clients. I think we repudiate. We handle those cases from pre-lit basis right through, and I think we repudiate over the last 10 years or so that we've been acting for them. I think we repudiate between 65 to 70% of public liability cases. So, which kind of, whether they're spurious, I don't know. I mean, some of them will be, but some are just through, firm denials, and then the claimant solicitors don't want to take the risk because of the cost consequences.
Yeah, I was going to say my reaction to that would be, well, that probably suggests to me that maybe, a third are spurious and a third are ones that you're being robust on and getting rid of them, and then a third are ones that end up being paid, and it might be something in that region, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think it just demonstrates the importance of having good processes and procedures in place, and if you build that, then it improves your defensibility.
Yeah, and that's interesting, because the next thing I was going to ask you about was actually what are the areas that clients can work on to kind of improve their defensibility. So you've kind of started touching on it there in terms of systems and processes.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first part of it is what can they do to try and avoid the accident to start with. So what can they do to try and have the right systems and processes in place? Risk assess all those potential accidents that may be seen around, for members of the public or their employees, and what can they do to prevent them to start with? And make sure they've got the right systems in place to manage that risk. But of course, that's all well and good having those systems and processes in place theoretically. It's then making sure that they can evidence them that they're operating. So I suppose that comes through training and making sure that everyone's trained in those processes and systems. And then I think it's making sure that you're auditing and making sure there's compliance. And if there's repeated offenders, and it might depend on the severity of the breach in terms of compliance, but if there's repeated offenders, then sometimes there's a reluctance to use discipline, and I think that is an important tool in making sure that you're demonstrating as a business that you're being proactive about managing that risk.
Yeah. I mean, I think from my much more limited experience than yours, a lot of the cases that I've been involved in have fallen down, excuse the pun, on the evidence side of things, because actually they've been able to show they've done some risk assessment in most cases. They've been able to show they've got some sort of strategy or policy in place, but they've not necessarily been able to show that they've actually carried out what they said they were going to do, and therefore that's a failing of the system.
Yeah, or there's been people have adopted their own systems and it's become an ad hoc process, and therefore which can of course then let them down. And I think also the big issue is, remember, you've got to, when you get to a trial, you've got to have witnesses to support these systems are in place, and depending upon the type of business that you operate, then it's going to, it could be that you have a relatively high turnover of staff. So and of course keeping control of those witnesses is not straightforward. So I think it demonstrates the importance to make sure that you get all those details at the outset, that you have a very good investigation process in place, and when you've had an accident, you're retaining all the key documents, so your systems and process, what was in place, and then everything to identify that it was operating at the time. And that would include retaining witnesses' details, and even just basic things like obtaining their personal email address can help, because whilst people might change mobile numbers and stuff quite often because there's deals on the market, they generally stick with email addresses.
So I've had the same email address since I was 12 or God knows what.
Yeah, I mean, I've kept the same mobile number for
me too.
Since day one, and I've transferred it. It became my personal number, and now it became a work number. But but I think it's important that you're retaining everything you can at the outset, including a good investigation in terms of the facts surrounding the accidents and the evidence around it, to make sure that you then retain it, because quite often you'll see this claim presented in 2 years' time, and then when you come in 2 years' time and someone presents this claim, and you've not done an investigation or an adequate investigation at the time, that's when it causes you difficulties, because quite often those documents may have been disposed of.
And is that a role for tech then to play? I mean, there's a lot of different tech solutions out there in the marketplace now, about risk management and claims mitigation and stuff. Is that, more important?
Undoubtedly. Yeah, undoubtedly. I think it's, digitizing your investigation processes, I think is one of your tactics around defensibility, because it means that you've got that robust system in place about retaining all the key documents. So that investigation that's done then, it will then sit in your system, won't it, in the cloud, or whatever your system is that you have. Then I think it's about making sure that you retain it in a digital format, and then of course it then becomes very easy to send to your insurers, your brokers, your claims handlers, your lawyers.
Yeah. One of the areas that I think tech can really help is, for example, on cleaning check sheets in washrooms of pubs or whatever, because you often see they're not, you go in as a user of the building and you see they haven't been filled in, and whereas, should something happen, you sometimes see coincidentally the handwriting all looks the same and as if it's all been written in one go. Whereas if you're logging it properly, then using technology, then it's going to be happening.
No, I agree with that. I've had numerous cases come through the door with that very issue with those check sheets, and lo and behold, it's the same pen, it's the same colour pen, it's the same handwriting, and then when you compare that name against the rota, lo and behold, they're not working on all those days. So it soon trips them up. So yeah, I mean, I agree that if you can have something that documents that they've been in and done those checks in the toilets, or they've done the checks of the floors in the premises, then whatever that process may be, tagging something or whatever, then I think that certainly can help. Of course, if you've got that, then you've got to make sure you use it, because it'll be trackable on the metadata, of course, as to what you've done. There's no going back and doing that afterwards. Not that I'd be encouraging anyone to do that, because that's making up evidence, which would get people in a lot of trouble.
Yes, that's the thing. I think it's a good way of following through with the policy you've put in place and making sure it gets done. But you need to make sure you do it. Otherwise, you're in arguably a worse position if you've thought about something and decided that this is appropriate to deal with a risk, and then you haven't done it. Is probably worse than not having considered it properly to start with, I guess.
Well, it is, and I think that's the whole thing about tech. I think there's some really good tech solutions out there, but I think if you're going to invest in them, you've got to make sure that you use them properly and you embed them in your processes and your systems, because if you don't, it's likely to cause you a bigger problem. And I know we've seen that debate, haven't we? I think in relation to cameras and the like in vehicles and telematics and the need and whether people should be using them, because once you've got it in there, you've really got to be monitoring your driver behaviours. And someone really has the responsibility for doing that, because it's otherwise, if there's a serious accident that takes place and that person has been shown to be driving dangerously for months on end before it, and you've done nothing about it, and you as an employee adapt behaviour, then it's going to cause you an issue.
No, absolutely. So we're sitting here having a chat in June, obviously, of 2020, and there's been a few things going on in the world with a certain C word.
He's chucking it down with rain outside there.
Well, there you go. We're having storms, and we've had wildfires in Australia, and biblical storms, and everything's been going on. Viruses, and anyway, what's happened? What effect has the virus had on the kind of claims landscape? Whether that's, are we seeing fewer claims happening, or will we see fewer claims arising in the future because obviously people have been sat at home rather than visiting places, or will it change in the future the types of claims that we're seeing coming through?
I think I'll come on to COVID claims in a minute, but I think the types of claims, the business as usual claims, will stay broadly the same. Of course, it's undoubtedly the case that the frequency is going to reduce, and has reduced at the moment. And we've seen all the stats around motor, for instance, in use of vehicles on the road. That's gradually going back up again. And of course, arguably, people might use the car more than they did before because they're more worried about using public transport. But in terms of casualty claims, then certainly, I mean, we only have to see the amount of businesses that are being required to close in the leisure and retail environment, which is where
there aren't many people slipping and tripping over at the moment. There are still some, because I'm still getting calls about certain things, but there are certainly many less.
Well, if you look at the volumes of people going into these, places, they're going to be significantly reduced. And of course, the numbers of staff that are on furlough as well means that they're not getting injured at work. So I think it'd be no surprise to see the claims reduced. And of course, you've got even those more critical retail environments that have remained open. Your supermarkets and your chemists and etc. They've got very risk managed approaches in terms of walking into the store at the moment. So
more controlled environments.
Oh yeah. So I suspect in any event, the amount of slips and trips that are occurring, as an example, within store is very much reduced. I think one of the risks, and certainly some of the risks that we could see in terms of business as usual claims, but also potential new claims, is that furlough creates a risk in that people may be off work for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, then go back to the workplace, and they may be doing a different role, or they're going back to their old role, but they're not receiving any refresher training in relation to it, or they've not given the appropriate training in the new role that they've got. Even it might be a dual role with something else they're doing before, because obviously costs are being cut to some extent, and therefore it leads to accidents. So I think I see that as a risk. And of course, you've also got the issue with people perhaps being more overloaded with responsibility, and therefore you could see stress claims arising out of that. So you could see those sorts of different cases. And I think if you also think about the accident investigation environment at the moment, you and social distancing measures, and I suppose give a construction site as an example. Traditional way to investigate an accident on a construction site may have been, you'll get your different contractors into the site office and you interview them, and you sit down and you take a statement. That's not really as easy these days at the moment in the current environment, and therefore all those investigations being done properly. And I think what we've got to make sure is that everyone's accident investigation is still robust. There's the opportunity to, we're talking on Zoom here. There's an opportunity to use tech around all this to retain evidence in a much better way. So it's just making sure that, we don't drop the ball in terms of the current investigations, because it could come back to haunt businesses in a year or two's time.
And I don't know how you do an interview, because I've never had to be interviewed in those circumstances. But I suppose actually one of the potential benefits of doing it on Zoom is that you could record the whole thing, and then again you've got a full digital record of every single thing that was said and or not said. So that could be a benefit. Actually.
Well, exactly, and we've been doing that anyway as a business. Gradually over the last year or two, probably a bit more. Particularly in relation to, if you think of a road traffic accident and you talk to your witness like this, and you share your screen and you put Google Earth or Google Maps on there, and you get them to draw on there, and you get to be able to actually get the evidence collated a lot quicker, a lot easier. You also get to assess their credibility. Then I think it can have some very, very big benefits, because if I do an interview of someone straight after the accident now by video, which is obviously a lot more cost efficient, then I can take a view in terms of what they got to say. And of course, when you get to the witness evidence and you're putting the statement together, you can work through the document together on screen. So it's there's actually a lot of benefits, and I think it's pushing everyone to be a little bit more digital in the way that they work. And I think that is a good thing. I think there's I think people have been slowly but surely moving in that direction, and this has just given them that big shove to make sure they do it now.
No, I think from my perspective, I'm certainly going to be questioning the need to travel to meetings and stuff now, because now we've established that we can connect with people, and people are now used to doing this kind of a conversation. You don't necessarily need to be traveling the length and breadth of the country to meet people necessarily.
I think that's right. I think there is still going to be a place for meetings in person, but I think that is right. I think there's going to be a lot more that can be done like this. We don't all need to be wasting lots of time sitting on trains and sitting in your car. And I think but there are going to be times where it's easier to manage a meeting where there's a number of participants, and you actually need to build a rapport and a relationship because you don't know the person that well. But I agree. I think there certainly could be a big potential to cut down that travel significantly, and of course that makes you more efficient. Because you'd have spent 4 hours. If I'm in Birmingham, and if I'm going to a meeting in London, if I spend 4 hours getting there and back, once I've got to the station in Birmingham and back, that's 4 hours that I can get some stuff done. But
could be used better.
I can get more done sat here.
No, absolutely.
So I think that's right. But I think I mentioned COVID types of cases as well, and of course we could expect to. I'm pretty confident that claimants are certainly going to be looking at this at the moment. I've heard a few rumours about a few cases that are in their potential infancy, and of course I think we've seen one in America already, haven't we? I think they're bringing one. I think I saw in the press.
I'm sure I saw something.
So I think we're certainly going to see it. And it's just that there's some quite significant hurdles to get over. But some industries and some environments may be easier to pursue those cases in than others.
And now a word from our sponsors.
Hi guys, sorry to interrupt the flow of the show, but I wanted to give a very quick plug for our sponsor, which actually is me and my business, Slip Safety Services. As you'll have gathered from tuning in, we're passionate about 3 things: slip safety, cleanliness, and hygiene. If any of those topics float your boat and you'd like to learn more about what we do, the outcomes we help to generate for our clients, and how it all really works, then please visit our website, slipsafety.co.uk/start. There you'll find a raft of information, from articles to videos to white papers to self-help tools, and you can start to delve deep into the rabbit hole of the world that we populate, which is all about making the world a cleaner, safer, more hygienic place. Cheers. Because the burden of proof, I go to work, and I catch COVID, but can I prove I caught it at work? The burden of proof is on me, isn't it? On the balance of probability, I think, to prove that I caught it at work. Is that right?
It is, and I think if you're the only, there's a team of 20 of you, or 30 of you, or 40 of you, and that only you has it, then I think you're going to have a pretty difficult time proving that you've caught that at work. Whereas if there's a cluster of cases at work, then I think it becomes I suppose it helps to prove you've caught it. It doesn't mean you get home on it, but it helps to support that argument. But you've still got to get over breach of duty, of course. So I mean, it's so there's obviously 3 elements to it. First, duty of care, proving your duty of care. Just think 3 steps: duty of care, breach of that duty, and causation. Duty of care is obviously a lot easier to establish between an employer and employee. But then the employee's got to prove that the employer's breached that duty, and of course that's what's important at the moment in terms of the employer making sure that their risk assessment process is right, and they're considering all the risks in their environment that could lead to COVID transmission in the workplace. And of course it's about implementing government guidance, and government guidance is frequently changing, and therefore your COVID crisis committees should be monitoring that and documenting it and making sure that you can evidence that you've done all that you could reasonably can in the circumstances to help your employees not suffer from COVID. And of course, and some of this may involve temperature checks. I think undoubtedly it's going to involve a lot around the hygiene and cleaning regimes in premises, because surfaces and I think is that big issue, isn't there, in common buildings around, well, what do you do if you're working on floor 15 and you've got to get the lift? I mean, what's the process and the system around the lift? Because touching those buttons and it's a confined space. So what's the process around that? Is it, depending on the size of the lift, is it one person at a time going up in the lift? You could have a queue going around that. No, you could have a queue going around the block. So I think that's why you're seeing a lot out there that I think you could only see, being able to facilitate 20%, 25% going back into the workplace initially, to certainly in that office environment. But time will tell on that, and that comes down to the risk managers to assess that risk, doesn't it? So, but I think it's that. But I think certainly, if you're a claimant and you're looking to bring a claim, you'll be targeting inadequate hygiene and cleaning regimes. You'd be targeting inadequate health surveillance and testing facilities, i.e. if you as an employee become aware of someone in the workplace that something starts developing, temperature or cough, or loss of sense of smell or taste, then get them home, obviously, immediately get them out of there. But and obviously then what do you do with the rest of the colleagues around them in terms of testing and everything? So systems around social distancing, one-way systems, and making sure if there's banks of desks, how many people you have at those banks of desks.
I've seen some interesting stuff on that, saying to reconfigure things slightly so people are facing in the same direction but sort of zigzag staggered, because then you can see what other people are doing, and then if they're moving, and and there's also more sense of community, and so thinking about it quite holistically of making the environment not only safe but as welcoming as it can be when offices go back.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, I agree. So I think staggered shifts, doors being left open if you're allowed to, because there's fire safety issues around that. Of course, and the process around that, and making sure that's fair. And I think you might also see those cases where someone's unwittingly or deliberately brought it into the workplace and then passed it on to colleagues. Is the employer vicariously liable for that? So there's a lot of complex case laws around vicarious liability. So that could be another battleground. So PPE, what do you provide? What do you do about masks and face coverings and the like? Again, it's going to depend upon what your workplace environment is, isn't it?
Yeah, bit of a minefield to say the least. But I think following the guidance, whether that's government guidance or industry guidance. So I mean, in the leisure sector, for example, UK Active have produced some guidance for leisure facilities, and actually their guidance goes kind of above and beyond what the government guidance says when it comes to cleaning and hygiene, for example. But I think that's because they perceive that with people exercising and you're breathing more heavily, you've got more risk of droplets spreading around and stuff, which I think is sensible. But following all that guidance is critical from a defensibility perspective, if in the event of any insurance claims, but also, of course, if it were ever to get that far, from a criminal perspective as well. Because if you look at the sentencing guidelines, and one of the things that puts you under high culpability is if you've not followed recognised industry guidance.
Well, and I'm sure if the HSE get to hear about any unsafe practices around implementing measures around protecting people against COVID, then they're going to be clamping down on this. So because they're not going to want outbreaks in individual locations. I mean, we've seen that anyway, aren't we? I mean, even if it's not the workplace, I think we saw it in Germany last week with that block of flats, didn't we? Where there was about 50 odd people. So it just shows how quickly it could spread. You've seen all those stories about people in church choirs and it causing infections there. So it just shows in that in I suppose in environment inside, it's a lot easier to spread it, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Good stuff. Interesting discussion on COVID. Keen just to conscious of times. I don't want to keep you because I know your time's precious for too long. But I'm keen just to to talk a bit about slips, slip strips and falls, but specifically slips. What sort of couple of tips would you give to people in terms of best placing themselves from a corporate perspective to be able to defend those types of claims? What should people be focusing on?
Slips and trips. I suppose it's having the right cleaning regimes in place and having the right inspection regime in place, because obviously it's the duties on the occupier to ensure the safety of their visitors or the reasonable safety of their visitors into their premises, and therefore it's about having those proactive systems in place to stop accidents occurring, or to reduce the risk of accidents occurring. So I think that's going to be checking the safety of the floors. Are there any inherent defects in the floors to start with, and then looking at the contamination on the floors and making sure that is removed at the earliest possible opportunity. There's obviously been erratic case law as to how long that contamination can be on the floor before it opens up that liability, and of course it always comes down to that subjective analysis by the judge on the day, but as to what the system is of that organisation, and that's where the risk arises. But I think it's about demonstrating that you thought about it and you've implemented systems to protect the business, and of course there's a reputational impact over all of this, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm quite hopeful that the renewed or reinvigorated or even potentially new focus on cleanliness and hygiene that we're seeing as a result of COVID should translate into a reduction of slips happening as well, theoretically, because if we're more on top of our cleaning, as you say, and then we're removing contamination more frequently and more diligently, then theoretically we should see fewer slips.
Yeah, I still want to be in a job though.
Oh, don't worry, James. There's going to still be plenty happening, I'm sure. And also, not everybody's going to go to that nth degree, because for all sorts of reasons. So I'm sure you and I will be in jobs for many years to come.
Well, there's a cost benefit analysis to do with all of this stuff, isn't there? So.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
A few specific questions that always come up are asked to me, so it'd be good to get your view. Yellow floor signs, helpful or not helpful? Helpful sometimes, but not other times. How would you describe those?
I think warning signs are helpful if used properly. If gives an example, if you're cleaning a corridor, if you're a cleaner cleaning a corridor and you're doing half a corridor at a time, you need to warn people that half of the corridor is wet. So you use a warning sign for it. You might be a retailer with a spillage in a shop, and therefore you just need to clean it. So you put a warning sign over it, and it's just being cleaned. And again, good opportunity. Use the warning sign, and it helps warn people of that danger, because obviously in the Occupiers Liability Act, there's reference to warning people and that being a guard against the risk. So used properly, I think they're good. The issues can be is if people just put them out and don't take them back in, and becomes this this process where I'll just leave them out permanently. It'll mean I can defend the cases. Now that would cause an issue, because someone will soon get evidence and say, well, they're always there. So I just assumed it was all right, and everyone becomes, they don't really take any notice of them, do they? It just becomes part of their everyday life that's there. So they just need to be used properly. So I think on balance, they're good, but they need to be used appropriately.
Yeah, there was the quite prominent case a few years ago in a co-op store in Cornwall, where a gentleman slipped and died as a result. He had a brain injury, quite a serious slip. And I think in the summing up after the criminal case, the Cornwall Council said, that this should serve as a warning to companies and particularly retailers that they can't just rely on signs, and as you say, putting them out and not thinking about other things. If there's contamination on the floor, they need to dry the floor and make it safe to use, or they need to stop people from using that floor. Was kind of in summary what the council said.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, so I think, I think there's a place for them. I think, undoubtedly,
definitely, yeah. Check sheets. We touched on this a little bit earlier, but again, just to summarise, good or bad, or potentially good or potentially bad.
Yeah, I think check sheets are good. You could digitise them, of course, and it would make their retention easier. Because we do see times where you get 3 years after an accident's taken place and they can't find them because it's too much paperwork, and therefore they've been binned, and therefore it becomes an issue finding them. So, but I think they, to have a process in around checking and using a sheet, in theory, good, but make sure you retain it, and you would hope that you're aware of most accidents, and therefore you can retain the appropriate sheets for the period before and I think of the day, but also in the days leading up to it, to show that. I think it's always useful to show that, if you get check sheets that just have tick, tick, tick on them and just shows everything is always good, then that creates a bit of suspicion by judges. So I think that it's always good to have on there, where they've identified an issue and they've done something about it. So and then it just shows that they're being used properly then, doesn't it? So I think I think probably that these things will be digitized more, and I think fairly easy to do on iPads and the like, isn't it, on tablets? So I just thought that that will be a better process moving forward. But it's just if you are going to document it on a piece of paper, then make sure you retain it. Because 3 years down the line, finding it is an issue.
Yeah. And interestingly, your answer is like with many things in life, it's good if it's done properly. If it's not done properly, it's maybe not so good. So there's a message there about sort of following through and implementing and doing what you say you're going to do.
It is, and I think don't underestimate the importance of CCTV footage as well, because you've got your process and system in place for doing the checks, and obviously it'd be helpful to have a check sheet. But if you retain the CCTV footage and there's an accident, then retain it for an hour or two before the incident and an hour or so after it and the incident itself, and it will demonstrate that your system was operating. Yeah, and that's the best evidence you can have.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's very, very, very powerful because it's showing you, and there's no question about was this done or wasn't it done? Well, there's proper evidence there that people can see. So yeah,
there is. So I'd certainly encourage that, and of course it's a lot easier to with the CCTV systems getting better to retain that evidence these days.
Yeah. What about slip test data? Is that a useful thing to help defend claims for slips, trips, and falls accidents?
What, in terms of checking, how slippery a floor is? Yeah. Yes, I think it certainly can help. I think it's really about it helps you as a business identify where your risks are, doesn't it? It will help you identify where you've got a floor that possibly doesn't come up to standard. If it does do that, and I think it's a good process and system to have in place to do that, because it could help you defend a HSE prosecution or arguably prevent an accident in due course. But if you don't do anything with that data, then again, then that's what's going to cause you an issue. So it all comes back to great, do it, but if you are going to do it, action it if it shows an issue. Or if you're not actioning it, say why and justify it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've had obviously countless examples of where doing the testing has been helpful to highlight an issue and then to remedy something and then to monitor that it's working over time and see fewer accidents and better defensibility. But I've also had cases where brokers, for example, have said, we don't want to do any slip testing because that's going to mean we won't be able to defend any claims. And my counter argument to that is, well, only if the data shows you've got an issue, and wouldn't it be better to know you've got an issue and therefore be able to do something about it, rather than just accepting that you might have an issue, or you think you've probably got an issue, and kind of keeping Pandora's box closed.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it is better to, I think, on balance, to know that you got the issue.
Yeah.
From a, I think from a reputational point of view, and also it probably protects you more if you do something with it against prosecution, doesn't it?
Yeah, because even if you someone who's got, I don't know, 1,000 retail stores, each of which are 1 million square feet, let's say, and they've all got the same floor, and that floor is a bit slippery when it's wet. Well, it's not reasonable or practicable to replace all of those floors everywhere. But the data of doing the testing might help to understand, where they could do other things in their systems to try and reduce the risk.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, I agree.
Yeah, more data, the better.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah. So.
Okay. Great. Well, James, thanks very much for your time. That's been really, really valuable, I think, and I'm sure people will have got a lot from that. What's the best way, if people want to learn a bit more about what you do, what BLM does, and how you could potentially help them? What's the best way for people to get in touch or to learn more? I think you've got a COVID hub, haven't you, on your website, for example?
We do. So yeah, we can access that through our website. People are welcome to email me, and if it's not me that's the right person to deal with a query, I'll certainly put them in touch with the right person with a BLM. It's it might be a different issue than a straightforward casualty issue. It might be a regulatory issue. It might be property issue. It might be an employment law issue, because that is in current environment, that's all around the issues of furlough and risk, and safety, and people refusing to come back to work and things like that. That's a big angle for the employment lawyers there. So yes, through my email address, or through LinkedIn.
Yeah. Okay.
I think is the best place, and delighted to help in any way we can.
Yeah, and we're hoping, we did an event together with a couple of other people for AMIC in January, which feels like a long time ago now.
It does. It's when we were allowed out.
Different world. Yeah, we 60 people in a room together. We wouldn't be doing that now, would we?
60 people. 6-7 people around a table. Yeah. Only two around.
But we're hoping to be able to do more of those kinds of events. Probably on Zoom, I guess, in the short to medium term. But that'd be something for people to look out for, I guess, and come at it, as you said, right at the start from a perspective of how can we help to prevent accidents from happening, but then how can we deal with anything that does happen and manage it and defend the claim in the best way possible.
Yeah, I don't know. I think we're doing lots of these, webinars, podcasts, video interviews, training sessions through whether it's Zoom, Teams, whatever the technology may be, and they're working really well. So I mean, if it's training for teams and organisation, I think it works well through just to a smaller group of people together, so you get full attention, full engagement. If it's just something that's on a wider subject matter that you're happy for people to log into and listen to a webinar, then again we can do that. I think I did one the week. It's easier to now. It shows it's easier to attend these events by this technology, because someone doesn't have to take hours and hours and hours out of their diary to come to an event in London or Birmingham or Manchester or wherever. They can log in and they can take part. Yeah, absolutely. So we'll look forward to trying to get some of those in the diary over the coming months ahead. So thanks again, James. Really appreciate you taking the time out. And we will see each other again, whether electronically or in person, soon, I'm sure.